What's up, heretics, gamers, other derogatory terms? How's it going out there? I am flying solo today because Corey is. Are they still on their way back from Vegas? Anyway, we have a lockout time for returning from big conventions, um, due to COVID. So I'm here by myself today, which means it's Warhammer 40k time, nerds. Nobody's around to stop me, so we're going to talk about Warhammer. Specifically, Spess Marine 2. Um, the return of the Spess Marine. This game is fun. This game is really a lot of fun. It is all about extremely large men hitting things with chainsaws. Is it an innovative game? I honestly don't play enough games to be able to tell you that. It probably derives a lot of its gameplay from things like Gears of War. What are some other like third-person shooter games like this? God of War? Yeah, Balatro, absolutely. Yeah, it takes a lot of its inspiration from Balatro, I feel. I still haven't played Balatro. Everyone I know loves it, and I feel like I look at gameplay of it and I watch people stream it, and I feel like I'm watching the game from that one episode of Star Trek where they're trying to like guide the disc into the cup and then have an orgasm. And I'm just looking at it and thinking like that doesn't sound. I don't get it. I don't get it. World War Z, or excuse me, World War Z, huh? I'm unfamiliar with it. No one understands Ashley Judd. I feel I understand exactly as much as I need to about Ashley Judd. It is the most number go up game. I get that now. Okay, I understand. Um, what do I want to say about Space Marine 2? Space Marine 2, I feel nails one of the vibes that Warhammer 40k seeks to instill. One of the vibes that it does well at, which is it is kind of fun to be a huge dude fighting gross monsters. Um, and a little bit of how ridiculous it is to have that fantasy. I think what it misses on is it celebrates the glory of being a space marine more than I think I like it to. And this is a dissonance that Games Workshop has not done a terribly good job of like managing or instilling. Some of the fiction does a very good job of communicating how expendable and the last USB device you connected to this computer malfunctioned and goodbye. I wonder what the last USB device connected to this computer was. Can we talk about that, Windows? No? Okay, well, I guess we'll find out eventually what the last USB device connected to this computer was. Um, so, okay. Space Marines in Warhammer 40k are transhuman super soldiers that were created by the Emperor of Mankind to lead a crusade across the galaxy to reclaim the galaxy for a united humanity under Imperial rule. Before that plan could be completed, roughly half of the Space Marines revolted and had an oopsie-whoopsie civil war that resulted in the Emperor being just barely not killed. So we have no idea what the intention was for the Space Marines after their initial task was completed. Right? The leaders of the Space Marines had their ideas, they had speculation, they had theories on what they would be doing. Some of them were like, they'll probably just kill us and we should like prevent that from happening. And others thought, well, no, we'll be leaders and statesmen and diplomats and philosopher kings under whatever happens next. But we don't know. Right? Like the character who we play in this game comes from a Space Marine chapter called the Ultramarines, and they used to be one of the original Space Marine legions that got broken up after the heresy. And the leader of that legion, their Primarch, Rabute Guilliman, was like, no, we're going to be leaders under this. And it's very important that all of my Space Marines be complete people, right? Like you are expected as part of your duties to be like literate and, you know, have a sense of justice and a broader horizon than simply being a living weapon. Others were like, I have no other purpose than killing people. I don't know what's happening, and that frightens me. So basically, the Space Marines who we were playing don't have a great track record. Imperial propaganda describes them as, you know, the ultimate defenders of humanity. But they're also kind of the biggest problem for humanity. Like the biggest proximate problem for humanity. Because, you know, roughly about 50% of them rebel in one way or another. And that trend line is held solid. It's one of the reasons why all the Space Marine chapters are too small to really do anything effectively. Right? Like they're busted up into these little self-contained armies of about 1,000 Marines. Asterisk. Some of them are considerably larger than that. I'm looking at you, Black Templars and Space Wolves. And this game would fit in beautifully as a bit of Imperial propaganda. If you look at older art from Warhammer 40k, Marines are really horrifying looking. Right? You take off their helmets and they're basically like lumps of scar tissue and bionic enhancements or replacements for organs that have been destroyed in combat. Technically speaking, I think Marines are basically, is the term immortal? Do I want to use immortal? Deathless, ageless, kind of. They don't seem to ever die of old age. There are some like Dante who are extremely old. Bjorn the Fell-Handed remembers the Horus Heresy 10,000 years ago. They are biologically immortal. Sure. Yeah. Actually, Dragonality, that's very interesting. They remind you of Evangelions. Sleek armor covering deep body horror. I would love for there to be a moment in this game where you are wandering around without your helmet on, and you encounter a statue of a Space Marine. I mean, you kind of do. You encounter a statue of Sanguinius at one point, I think, who was another one of the Space Marine Primarchs. He was very beautiful. He's the ideal of a noble imperial hero. Um, and just looking at that and then looking at yourself in the mirror, right? Um, what else do I want to talk about? Anyway, I think that's like a little failure of the game. I think there's a lot of pathos to the Space Marines because they are recruited as children. They are biologically enhanced. They are genetically enhanced. They are psycho indoctrinated, which is the Imperial's response to that huge rebellion. A lot of it was organizational and administrative, but Space Marines now are brainwashed, like constantly, right? The psycho indoctrination was not really a thing during the Horus Heresy. At least, I don't remember it being a thing. I've been going through the books. I don't believe that they are like psycho conditioned. Um, but now they are, right? Uh, I would love for this game to. I would love to play a Space Marine who is constantly drifting in and out of uh, uh, possibly hallucinogenic states or oneric states, right? Where you are like, this is possibly a dream. I'm not really sure. I mean, those were the world eaters, kind of, where they weren't really like. Um, I mean, the world eaters were given. The world eaters were a legion of space marines who, in order to better understand their Primarch, who had been hideously mutilated on the planet he arrived on, and was used as a slave gladiator, and given implants into his brain that made him only able to feel rage. His entire legion, when he was rediscovered, were like, "We're going to do that too, in order to better understand you." It worked out about as well as you would expect. Um, oh, the Angron book depicts literally that at a few points. I should read that. Um, Blood Angels slowly succumbing to Black Rage. I really like the idea that the Blood Angels, that the Black Rage. I mean, it's something that we see a little bit of during the Heresy, and I think it's alluded to existing before they found Sanguinius again. But I like to think that Sanguinius just kind of stabilized that for a little while. And then they just kind of went back to that and it got a new name. Anyway, um, this game is fun. It's really fun. It looks great. It does a lot of things that I have not encountered in games before, i.e., depicting the enormous scale of combat that occurs in this universe. There are other things that I don't like as much. Uh, Man, the Chud Hammer dudes love this game. And I understand why, because it is very uncritical. Um, well, it's not very uncritical. Like there is a lot of like interrogation of why things have to be this way. But it is very effective in glorifying like being awesome. Right? I'm not sure how far we'll get in it. I've beaten the game. I've played a little bit of multiplayer. I want to talk about like its campaign. Um, but mainly, I just want to like, okay, the part where you uh, pick up the fallen Ultramarines banner and you stand like on the broken plinth, surrounded by your bros as warp portals open around you, and like hordes of little dudes charge at you while you and your bros like have a heroic last stand. That's sweet. That is like unambiguously sick as hell. it, uh, you know, dudes just want one thing, and it's to die in glory. Not really, but like I get it, right? Uh, the foundational myth, or one of the West's foundational myths, is the last stand of the 300 Spartans by against Xerxes, because martial pride, I think, is something that humans resonate with. It's also profoundly fashy, right? Like you're looking at it going like, yeah, yeah, this leads to some dark places. Um, it and I think it's mainly the focus of the game, right? I think a lot of the problem comes from just like the completely honest, understandable, and focused way that the game works. It's all combat, so you're seeing all the awesome parts, right? Um, if the spaces between missions was just like you going back, shitting in your armor, being fed a nutrient slop made mostly of lard, because that's the only way I can imagine Marines get enough calories. Um, and then like you go into your cell and like sleep for 4 hours while being fed a like psycho indoctrination directly into your brain. That would have a bit more depth to it, but also like pressing X to eat slop. There's not a lot of gameplay there. That wouldn't be very much fun. Yeah, 300 Spartans and 700 Thespians, 900 Helots, who were people the Spartans owned, 400 Thebians. Weren't there a bunch of like Arcadians? Right? Like, there were a couple thousand Greek soldiers guarding the pass. Yeah, press X to eat slop. And in that respect, it's a very faithful kind of like adaptation of the tabletop aesthetic. A faithful adaptation of the tabletop gaming experience would be your character gets blown the fuck away by a plasma gun. Right? Like, all right, we step out of the drop pod, and let's see, we rolled 14 saves and I rolled 12 ones. And as always with my 40K streams, um, I think it's important that we engage honestly with why this feels great. Because it has an appeal, right? Orwell said in My Country, Right or Left that like the boiled rabbits of the left can't understand the heart that leaps at the anthem or at the flag, right? And that's kind of a problem for them. It's not that it's good that that happens, but unless you kind of get why that happens, you aren't going to be able to effectively combat it when you feel it. Right? Let me look at. I should honestly have gotten this ready beforehand. And Orwell isn't the final authority on this. He had some problems of his own, but I think like this is particularly apt. Um Maybe we should just read My Country, Right or Left. It's like 3 pages. Ba, ba, ba. Okay, what do you say we just do this? I'm going to read My Country Right or Left to you because I think it's like an interesting starting point and like conversational touchstone. Maybe I should play the game so that anyone walking in and seeing that the game reads Space Marine 2 and then sees me sitting here droning on is not like, well, I'm going to report this channel for false advertising. Also, another thing this game does well is that its hard mode is actually pretty good. Once you get the mechanics of the game down, hard mode actually kind of rules, and I think it does it quite well. The enemies don't just become damage sponges, and there aren't just more of them. All right. All right. That doesn't work. Okay. This is talking. Okay. Okay, it can see the controller. That is good. Goodbye. What's going on here, folks? You know, the buttons work, but the sticks don't. I'm concerned. Maybe it's this. And due to the nature of our streaming setup, i.e. the fact that I've got two, I think these are headlights from a Ford F-350 directly in my eyes, my experience of seeing the monitor is going to be slightly different than yours. Judith Jarvis Thompson, I have not Orlandia. Okay, that looks good. What was I saying? My Country Right or Left? Okay. Contrary to popular belief, the past was not more eventful than the present. If it seems so, it is because when you look backward, things that happened years apart are telescoped together, and because very few of your memories come to you genuinely virgin. It is because of the books, films, and reminiscences that have come between the War of 1914-18 is now supposed to have had some tremendous epic quality that the present one lacks. But if you were alive during that war, and if you disentangle your real memories from their later accretions, you find that it was not usually the big events that stirred you at the time. I don't believe that the Battle of the Marne, for instance, had for the general public the melodramatic quality that it was afterwards given. I do not ever remember hearing the phrase Battle of the Marne till years later. It was merely that the Germans were 22 miles from Paris, and certainly that was terrifying enough after the Belgian atrocity stories, and then for some reason they had turned back. I was 11 when the war started. If I honestly sort out my memories and disregard what I have learned since, I must admit that nothing in the whole war moved me so deeply as the loss of the Titanic had done a few years earlier. This comparatively petty disaster shocked the whole world, and the shock has not quite died away even yet. I remember the terrible, detailed accounts read out at the breakfast table, In those days, it was a common habit to read the newspaper aloud, and I remember that in all the long list of horrors, the one that most impressed me was at at the last the Titanic suddenly upended and sank bow foremost, so that the people clinging to the stern were lifted no less than 300 feet into the air before they plunged into the abyss. It gave me a sinking sensation in the belly, which I can still all but feel. Nothing in the war ever gave me quite that sensation. At the outbreak of war, I have three vivid memories. Which, being petty and irrelevant, are uninfluenced by anything that has come later. One is the creation of the German Emperor. I believe the hated name Kaiser was not yet popularized till a little later, that appeared in the last days of July. People were mildly shocked by this guying of royalty, but he's such a handsome man, really, although we were on the edge of war. Another is of the time when the army commandeered all the horses in our little country town, and a cabman burst into tears in the marketplace when his horse, which had worked for him for years, was taken away from him. And another is of a mob of young men at the railway station, scrambling for the evening papers that had just arrived on the London train, and I remember the pile of pea-green papers, some of them were still green in those days, the high collars, the tightish trousers, and the bowler hats, far better than I remember the names of the terrific battles that were already raging on the French frontier. Of the middle years of the war, I remember chiefly the square shoulders, bulging calves, and jingling spurs of the artillerymen, whose uniform I much preferred to that of the infantry. As for the final period, if you ask me to say truthfully what is my chief memory, I must simply answer margarine. It is an instance of the horrible selfishness of children that by 1917 the war had almost ceased to affect us, except through our stomachs. In the school library, a huge map of the Western Front was pinned on an easel, with a red silk thread running across on a zigzag of drawing pins. Occasionally the thread moved half an inch this way or that, each movement meaning a pyramid of corpses. I paid no attention. I was at school among boys who were above the average level of intelligence, and yet I do not remember that a single major event of the time appeared to us in its true significance. The Russian Revolution, for instance, made no impression, except on the few whose parents happened to have money invested in Russia. Among the very young, the pacifist reaction had set in long before the war ended. To be as slack as you dared on OTC parades and to take no interest in the war was considered a mark of enlightenment. The young officers who had come back, hardened by their terrible experience and disgusted by the attitude of the younger generation, to whom this experience meant just nothing, used to lecture us for our softness. Of course, they could produce no argument that we were capable of understanding. They could only bark at you that war was a good thing. It made you tough, kept you fit, etc., etc. We merely sniggered at them. Ours was the one-eyed pacifism that is peculiar to sheltered countries with strong navies. For years after the war, to have any knowledge of or interest in military matters, even to know which end of a gun the bullet comes out of, was suspect in enlightened circles. 1914 to 18 was written off as a meaningless slaughter, and even the men who had been slaughtered were held to be in some way to blame. I have often laughed to think of that recruiting poster, "What did you do in the Great War, Daddy?" A child is asking this question of his shame-stricken father, and of all the men who must have been lured into the army by just that poster, and afterwards despised by their children for not being a conscientious objector. But the dead men had their revenge after all. As the war fell back into my past, my particular generation, those who had been just too young, became conscious of the vastness of the experience they had missed. You felt yourself a little less than a man because you had missed it. I spent the years 1922 to 27 mostly among men a little older than myself who had been through the war. They talked about it unceasingly, with horror of course, but also with a steadily growing nostalgia. You can see this nostalgia perfectly clearly in the English war books. Besides, the pacifist reaction was only a phase, and even the just too young had all been trained for war. Most of the English middle class are trained for war from the cradle onwards, not technically, but morally. The earliest political slogan I can remember is, "We want 8 and we won't wait." At 7 years old, I was a member of the Navy League and wore a sailor suit with HMS Invincible on my cap. Even before my public school OTC, I had been in a private school cadet corps. On and off, I have been toting a rifle ever since I was 10, in preparation not only for war, but for a particular kind of war, A war in which the guns rise to a frantic orgasm of sound, and at the appointed moment you clamber out of the trench, breaking your nails on the sandbags, and stumble across mud and wire into the machine gun barrage. I am convinced that part of the reason for the fascination that the Spanish Civil War had for people of about my age was that it was so like the Great War. At certain moments, Franco was able to scrape together enough airplanes to raise the war to a modern level, and those were the turning points. But for the rest of it, it was a bad copy of 1914 to 18. A positional war of trenches, artillery, raids, snipers, mud, barbed wire, lice, and stagnation. In early 1937, the bit of the Aragon front that I was on must have been very much like a quiet sector of France in 1915. It was only the artillery that was lacking. Even on the rare occasions when all the guns in Huesca and outside it were firing simultaneously, there were only enough of them to make a fitful, unimpressive noise like the ending of a thunderstorm. The shells from Franco's 6-inch guns crashed loudly enough, but there were never more than a dozen of them at a time. I know that what I felt when I first heard artillery fired in anger, as they say, was at least partly disappointment. It was so different from the tremendous unbroken roar that my senses had been waiting for 20 years. I don't know quite in what year I first knew for certain that the present war was coming. After 1936, of course, the thing was obvious to anyone except an idiot. For several years, the coming war was a nightmare to me, and at times I even made speeches and wrote pamphlets against it. But the night before the Russo-German Pact was announced, I dreamed that the war had started. It was one of those dreams which, whatever Freudian inner meaning they may have, do sometimes reveal to you the real state of your feelings. It taught me two things. First, that I should be simply relieved when the long-dreaded war started. Secondly, that I was patriotic at heart, and would not sabotage or act against my own side, would support the war, would fight in it if possible. I came downstairs to find the newspaper announcing Ribbentrop's flight to Moscow. So war was coming, and the government, even the Chamberlain government, was assured of my loyalty. Needless to say, this loyalty was and remains merely a gesture. As with almost everyone I know, the government has flatly refused to employ me in any capacity whatsoever, even as a clerk or private soldier, but that does not alter one's feelings. Besides, they will be forced to make use of us sooner or later. If I had to defend my reasons for supporting the war, I believe I could do so. There is no real alternative between resisting Hitler and surrendering to him, and from a socialist point of view, I should say that it is better to resist. In any case, I can see no argument for surrender that does not make nonsense of the Republican resistance in Spain, the Chinese resistance to Japan, etc. But I don't pretend that it is the emotional basis of my actions. What I knew in my dream that night was that the long drilling in patriotism which the middle classes go through had done its work, and that once England was in a serious jam, it would be impossible for me to sabotage. But let no one mistake the meaning of this. Patriotism has nothing to do with conservatism. It is devotion to something that is changing, but is felt to be mystically the same, like the devotion of the ex-white Bolshevik to Russia. To be loyal to both Chamberlain's England and to the England of tomorrow might seem to be an impossibility, if one did not know it to be an everyday phenomenon. Only revolution can save England. That has been obvious for years, but now the revolution has started, and it may proceed quite quickly if we can only keep Hitler out. Within 2 years, maybe a year, if only we can hang on, we shall see changes that will surprise the idiots who have no foresight. I dare say the London gutters will have to run with blood. All right, let them, if it is necessary. But when the red militias are billeted in the Ritz, I shall still feel that the England I was taught to love so long ago for such different reasons is somehow persisting. I grew up in an atmosphere tinged with militarism, and afterwards I spent 5 boring years within the sound of bugles. To this day, it gives me a faint feeling of sacrilege not to stand attention during God Save the King. That is childish, of course, but I would sooner have that kind of upbringing than be like the left-wing intellectuals who are so enlightened that they cannot understand the most ordinary emotions. It is exactly the people whose hearts have never leapt at the sight of a Union Jack who will flinch from revolution when the moment comes. Let anyone compare the poems of John Cornford, wrote not long before he was killed, before the storming of Huesca, with Sir Henry Newbolt's There's a Breathless Hush in the Close Tonight. Put aside the technical differences, which are merely a matter of period, and it will be seen that the emotional content of the two poems is almost exactly the same. The young communist who died heroically in the International Brigade was public schooled to the core. He had changed his allegiance, but not his emotions. What does that prove? Merely the possibility of building a socialist on the bones of a blimp, the power of one kind of loyalty to transmute itself into another, the spiritual need for patriotism, and the military virtues for which, however little the boiled rabbits of the left may like them, no substitute has yet been found. That was from Orwell's Folios of New Writing, published in autumn 1940. He would amend some of those views later. But what I want to take from that is just the idea that, like, it's important to recognize the parts of yourself that respond to things like this. Because I would say that this game is awesome and also somewhat problematic. But if we're aware of that, maybe it makes it easier to enjoy the parts that we find fun while interrogating and being able to resist the parts that are problematic. You know? Is the game fascist? Well, death of the author. Yeah, there's a skull in the middle of our helmet. It does raise some, questions. We're kind of covered in skulls. We have the big one on our chest, the Imperialis. The Imperium is kind of founded on human supremacy and grievance. And, in the far future, there is only war. The Imperium is an entity that has found its only path to sustainability is dedicating its entire product to a war of survival. Right? Like, the Imperium discovered that you can actually fight your own psychic reflection with a bolt gun, as long as you put everything into it. And that's kind of sustainable, or at least it's been sustainable over 10,000 years. Don't ask if it's going to be sustainable for the next 100. It's all falling down. The edifice is crumbling. This is a setting that is explicitly like been 5 minutes to midnight since its inception, and they have moved that time forward with some success. I would say it's kind of interesting that Gilliman has come back and is like, what the fuck happened? Yeah, it is literally just like the first thing the game tells you in every incarnation is that it is the cruelest regime imaginable, the cruelest and bloodiest regime imaginable. It's kind of a parody of Thatcher's Britain. It's a parody of post-imperial Britain, I feel. That this is something that came out of an England that was reckoning with the fact that it was no longer an imperial power. I think it's very, very hard to get a good handle on Warhammer 40k unless you reckon with the truth that it is written by and for a British audience. This is not the product of Americans. Americans, I think, have a very different perspective on empire because Americans are currently the empire, right? That this was written in post. When this was written, rationing had only ended 15 years before? the people who wrote this game had grown up during rationing. It was pretty hard to ignore in post-war England that whatever glory you associated with your imperial past was over. It was over. Yeah, Judge Dredd, that kind of thing. The American idea of empire is Star Wars? Yeah. Oh, no kidding, Rourke. Awesome. Yeah, maybe Hauntology is actually a good touchstone for this. Mark Fisher's Hauntology is, I've read a lot of Fisher. I think he reinvents a lot of things. Hauntology is just the idea that our world is haunted by other potential worlds that could have existed. That you go through your life and you see the specters of everything else that could have been. Would you say that that's a good, distillation of Hauntology? We're on a delay. But yeah, the Imperium only knows brutality. It can only respond with brutality because that's the only thing that it accepts, and it won't show weakness to itself. Right? It is only escalatory. The Imperium will respond with absolute violence to any threat, because not doing so would put you at risk of being the new absolute threat. Well, yeah, the rebels in Star Wars were the Viet Cong and the Empire was the US. Yeah, you can see it in the aesthetic of the Empire, right? Which is not only drawing on American military, or the concept of the American military, but of specifically architecture, the work of Le Corbusier, right? The monolithic architecture, the design aesthetic of saying, I don't care what the landscape is. I don't care what the requirements of the people living here are. We are building this, and then you are going to live in it. Okay? And if you don't like it, that's your problem. Wham! The projects. Immortal Len, it's because the Imperium of Warhammer 40k is the inheritor of the Imperium of Warhammer 30k, and it has taken 10,000 years for it to finally collapse in a way that it is becoming aware of. The Imperium is in a state of collapse and has been for 10,000 years. It's just that big. One of the books that I was reading recently, Chris Wright's, he wrote 2 books that dealt with the Adeptus Custodes and the Anathema Psychana, Watchers of the Throne. It deals with the High Lords of Terra. One of the prospective characters is the Chancellor of the High Lords. And they don't find out that Cadia fell for months. It just does not work its way back that Cadia, the great fortress on the edge of the Hellmouth, was destroyed. The leaders of the Imperium don't find out about that for months, or possibly years. The Imperium is huge. It's hilariously inefficient, and its brutality is kind of its only survival strategy. And the biggest problem with that is that it kind of works. The Great Crusade wiped out basically anyone who could offer organized resistance to humanity, and humans are good at war in this universe. Human brutality, human warfare is really strong. And it is a real big corpse that doesn't know it's dead yet, but can still do a lot of damage. Where did I leave? I was playing through this game on Nightmare. I should actually, I should probably just start over, right? Ugh. How do I play? Okay, I've totally forgotten how to play. So, let's start a new game, shall we? I mean, I kind of love the Tau because I think there's a really interesting conversation to be had. Oh man, regarding the way the Tau have changed since they were introduced in third edition. Because people are like, no, Games Workshop ruined the Tau by making them like grimdark when they were supposed to be like the foil to that. I think it's quite interesting that the Tau in universe eventually became a reflection of humanity. Yeah, they're the Federation from Star Trek, kind of. Um, but I like the concept that nothing survives contact with humanity in this world. That in order to survive in the galaxy that humanity has made, which is very different than the galaxy as it is, um, because the galaxy of Warhammer 40k is one that is more or less the result of the human artificial selection. uh, in order to survive in that, you need to become whatever is able to survive humanity. One thing I dislike about this game is that you cannot go back and play previous missions. Angel of Death is honestly quite fun. Let's actually read what the game tells us about itself. Why is the sound cutting out at intervals? Well, it's actually time for the first break. We have played roughly 6 seconds of the game. actually, let's talk a bit about like the galaxy as is, because the Tyranids are an extragalactic threat. They come from outside. They come from a different galaxy. We have no idea where they came from. Do they represent the universe as is? Or would a better humanity not be threatened at all by the Tyranids? Right? Like, the Imperium only knows how to fight the Tyranids head on. But you have to imagine, like, Starfleet would look at the Tyranids and be like, yeah, we can synthesize food for them, and then just, like, put beacons around, and then they'll wander off back into space. Right? The culture from Ian M. Banks' Culture series would not even, like, have to interact with the Tyranids. Would a better humanity ever survive? I would love to write a story in which the Imperium discovers traces of information that there is another human civilization in the galaxy that is more or less just completely avoiding the Imperium. That there's like a human civilization out in the Halo stars that is just like, yeah, this place is kind of fucked up. That's kind of like the Votan. Also, I really want to know how Titus's hood is staying on. What is his hood attached? Yeah, the Interax. But the Interax were still like... The Interax were still on the same scale as the Imperium. They had a very different ethos, right? And they were put in the... Like, I think Dan Abnett wrote them specifically to provide a foil to the Imperium and to establish as, like, first principles, or as a first principle, that the Imperium is not the only way. I mean, yeah, I like that the Votan are hyper-capitalists, and it's debatable who eats a planet further or faster, the Tyranids or the Leagues.
Repeat. Kill team leader to squad. Confirm Vox contact.
We've crashed. It's from your position.
Do you have the virus bomb?
And, like, I can't emphasize enough that we're talking about fucking Warhammer here, right? It's stupid. All of what we're talking about here is advertising to sell toy soldiers. We need to, like...
Negative. No contact since the crash.
Is this game Imperial propaganda? No, it's an ad.
What are your orders?
It's so much worse than that.
Launch the virus bomb into the stratosphere.
Does that make it not awesome?
And watch Tyranids die. A sight I will greatly enjoy.
Transmitter must be broken.
Yeah, I'd imagine that, like, the Tyranids leave enough, like... The Tyranids don't eat the core of the planet. I imagine that the Votan and the Tyranids would be like, yes, we can use the entire planet. The Votan just, like, go in the wake of the bugs. and are like, wow, it's a lot easier to mine this now that everything is dead. We don't have to feel anything about this. Not that we felt anything before.
Alpha, where's that damn virus bomb? I'm up to my elbows in these wretched bonds. Any word from Brother Darius or the commander? Nothing. It is left to us to share the glory now, Kelstras.
Hold on, brothers.
This rules. The animation is so much fun, right? There's a parry. Every monster has its own set of parry animations. There's one later in the game where you're fighting Zangors, where one of their parry animations is like the monster launches itself at you through the air, and you just parry it by kicking it in the groin really hard as it's jumping at you. And then it dies. And you're like, yeah, I kicked him in the dick.
Now they send larger meat to stop me.
My parries suck. I don't know how to parry the Lash Whip, man. They attack 2 times this animation? See, like, this is why I'm no good at these games.
Where's that damn virus bomb?
No, I've already been through this. You don't need to tell me this
To my
again.
elbows in these wretched bonds. Any word from Brother Darius or the commander? Nothing. It is left to us to share the glory now, Kelstras.
Hold on, brothers.
Yes, I know. I'm supposed to be parrying. Puppy. Just parry 1, parry 2 is the rhythm. Just be relaxed about it? Okay. I also like how the game simulates your super senses as a space marine by letting you parry things that are attacking you from behind. I think that would be extremely frustrating if I was
Now they send larger
what did I press? The best place to start. What do you want to learn about Vanilla Fish? What do you think is a cool part of the setting that you want to know about? Because whatever you think is cool and interesting, as long as it's not the Leagues of Votann or the Eldar, Games Workshop will sell you a book about it. The factions. Which of the factions speak to you? I mean, the general accepted starting point, if you want to like get into Warhammer fiction or learn about the setting, is the Eisenhorn trilogy. Everyone loves the Eisenhorn trilogy. It was written by Dan Abnett, who's kind of like unambiguously probably the most technically skilled author that Games Workshop employs. He's extremely good at world building. He came up with a lot of the terms that you will hear in the game or that you will encounter in the game. Like, he just had to develop a lot of vocabulary when he started writing. So like the Eisenhorn books, which start with a book called Xenos, are, you know, they're fun. They're well written. They move along. They are very unlike the tabletop. They are books that follow an Imperial Inquisitor as he works a case. They are very kind of like, people call them noir, but noir is a very American thing. What they are Le Carré books in space. Right? Noir is like, I suppose they could be a British understanding of noir, of like hard-boiled detective novels. If you gave those to a British man who read them and then like made them British, you would, and spacey, you would wind up with something like Eisenhorn. I would say they'd probably have more in common with like Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy and like The Spy Who Came In From the Cold than they do with like Chinatown. But honestly, the best way to learn about the game might be the way that I learned about it, which is reading the core rule book when you're 13. You know? The core books, the rule book, honestly do a pretty good job of giving you a survey of the setting. I think it might be a bad move to hand someone who's like, I want to learn about this, a cinder block of a novel and be like, here you go. I think, I don't know. I think the, whatever the current edition of the game, reading through the first like 50 pages of that might actually be a bit better. Funko, I don't know about lore YouTube videos. Honestly, I don't trust a lot of them. I've run into lore videos that are poorly researched, don't have a good grasp on like the material that they're talking about. misrepresent or misinterpret things. Um, and yeah, just like have problems. There are a couple of lore YouTubers that I like. I like Oculus Imperia. I like Arbiter Ian. Other ones, Arbiter Ian, I think is really interesting because he actually isn't really a lore YouTuber. He is much more a historiographer of Warhammer 40K. And before you laugh at me, his videos are honestly quite like interesting and honest about where the material comes from, what it's doing, how it's changed, and what it's like to read it. Because he will talk, like in one of his lore videos, he will like go into how the subject of the video has been represented or written by Games Workshop through like sometimes multiple decades of storytelling. And like what the context of it is. But I think that's more advanced material. I think a lot of people get in, like, I don't know, maybe you're the kind of person who, there are definitely people out there who are like, yeah, hook me up to the fire hose. And I gotta respect that. uh, but I think for like a general audience, it might just be easier to like go into your local game store and flip through one of the gaming books. Yeah, also state there are a few um channels out there that you definitely want to avoid. Arch Warhammer is a neo-Nazi who was one of the first people. Well, Games Workshop is very cagey about telling people to fuck off. Yeah, not even very neo. Like Bricky has really popular videos. I like Bricky. Um, I think he's wrong about a lot of things. I think Bricky is probably a really nice man. His enthusiasm is absolutely infectious. Um, I think he gets things wrong, but it's pretty hard to argue with the enthusiasm he brings. Yeah, he's got the spirit. He's definitely got the spirit. Um, but like my introduction to Warhammer 40K was, I think, not even reading the second ed main rulebook, like the second ed Codex Imperialis. I think the first thing I read for Warhammer was probably the Eldar Codex, the second edition Eldar Codex. Or it might have been the Sisters of Battle one, or it might have been borrowing a friend's Tyranids one. Because like the rule book is written as a way of like introducing people to the setting or whatever feels natural, right? Like they do try to publish novels. Like I haven't read it, but apparently the novel Leviathan, which is the companion novel to the 10th edition rulebook, is fine. Tells you about the setting as it is right now, tells you about the campaign, tells you about the dolls that come in the box. It's probably a fine place to start. I liked Eisenhorn. I liked Gaunt's Ghost. Gaunt's Ghost is kind of dad core, though. Gaunt's Ghost is very dad core, I would say. If you like Sharp's Rifles in Space, Dan Abnett has said like he wasn't trying to write Sharp in space. And And there are big differences between the two, namely one's in space, the other one's in Spain. You can see the confusion, space and Spain, but you know, like, they're fun. They're good books. I like them. Yeah, what you want to do is pick up Horus Rising. Then once you've read all 64 Horus Heresy novels, then you can start to get into things. It's like how if you want to learn if you want to get into Star Wars, first you have to track down a copy of Tales of the Jedi from 1992 and read that, because that is the oldest part of the setting, right? My phone done being blown up. Anyway, there's like a trillion Black Library novels. If you pick up something by Dan Abnett or by Aaron Dembski Bowden or Chris Raitt or even Graham McNeil, I think Graham McNeil is like, he's got a good sense for action sequences that are satisfying, right? Storm of Iron, I still think, is a banger of a novel. But I think Horus Heresy is a bad place to start out. I think Horus Heresy is something that gets a lot better if you have a very solid grounding in the setting already. I think it's much more satisfying if you know how it all turns out, if you're able to like recognize the little Easter eggs that are everywhere in it. Because I think if you get dumped into Horus Heresy, you're just like, I have no idea what the fuck is going on or who any of these people are. What is this? But like, I don't know. I think Spear of the Emperor is a fun read. It's about Space Marines. If you like this, not the menu, but the gameplay that the menu is covering, Spear of the Emperors by Aaron Dembski Bowden fucking kicks some ass. What if you like the menu? There's probably an Ultramarines joke in there somewhere. If you like the menu, then may I recommend Know No Fear, book 21 of the Horus Heresy series? 19, 20, 21, somewhere in there, by Dan Abnett. It's about the Ultramarines. Shall I play a video game? Actually, what I need to do is take a break. We're an hour and a half into this. I actually do need to run an ad. So I'm going to take a quick break, and then when we come back, we might look at some gameplay. BRB. What's up, nerds? I'm back. I got myself an ice cold Coca-Cola. Syrupy. And I found a frozen O. Henry bar in the freezer, which is probably where you go to find frozen things. I'm going to let it thaw, but I do like my chocolate cold. Okay. What were we doing again? We were playing Warhammer. And we're discussing entry points into the fiction. Square. I'm just admiring the texture on our cloak. Man, I think my favorite calligraphy style is black letter. I just kind of really like the idea that, like, it was less legible. So it was, black letter was actually worse as a means of, like, writing. But, it meant that your monks in your scriptorum could... Oh. Could make so many more texts. Are you fucking eating them? I think that might count as abusing your Becher's gland, dude.
No. For every gaunt I smash, 10 more come raining down. If we fail to launch that bomb, there will be nothing to stop the Tyranids.
Yeah, black letter was just really fast to write.
Just make sure the launcher is still standing when I get there. Hold the line for as long as I can.
Weaken the enemy. Combos. Wombo and otherwise. It's raining men. Oh, I mean, like, I've already played through it with controller Pixel Savage. I think I would have to relearn things a lot more.
Kill team, I am at the crash site.
I was playing through it on... When you saw me earlier, I was playing through it on Angel of Death, which is why I'm playing through it on Angel of Death right now. I think Angel of Death is actually kind of hard setting done well, which I was not really expecting, and has kind of delighted me.
Baron, my brother, you have honored the Imperium with your devotion.
Who are you? Templar, huh? Why do you get to wear your emblem on your face? I thought Deathwatch
Hellstrom,
only had
if
one
you can
pauldron.
hear me, I have the virus bomb. Headed to the orbital launcher.
Is that as hard as
Who's the biggest red flag faction in the game, do you think? Is it Templars?
Hold fire! No! Your death will not go unpunished.
The parries are extremely satisfying in this game.
Tyranids have breached the perimeter. Ulfa, anyone? Is the bomb en route?
You. Hush.
Hellstross, are you with me? I have the bomb! You have served your Emperor well, brother. Record log. To any Imperial unit that recovers this log, my kill team crash landed off course. My brothers are all dead, slain by Tyranids. I have the virus bomb, moving to the orbital launcher. We'll fire into stratosphere where it will disperse over Tyranid positions.
Yeah, well, old-fashioned way.
The virus is our one chance to delay the Tyranid invasion. The virus will spread through their forces.
I mean, we could talk a bit
It
about,
will
like,
adapt, but it will slow
who
them down.
Titus's home
The
chapter
virus
is.
must be launched into the stratosphere.
They're the Ultramarines.
Nothing else matters.
They're the ones who were responsible for what is now orthodox combat tactics for the Space Marines. They're the ones who came through the heresy with most of their numbers intact, and so formed the overwhelming majority of Space Marine chapters, right? So, you know, something like what, 3/4 of all Space Marine chapters are descended from Ultramarines. Yeah, your daddy wrote the Space Marine Bible, basically, to largely the same effect as the actual Bible. Hmm. That rules. That never stops feeling good, folks. I gotta tell you. I'm okay with that. That never stops being fun. In fact, I'm going to reward myself by breaking a tooth on this frozen chocolate bar. Also, is anyone else with me in believing that these heavy stubbers are something we're going to see in the Krieg heavy weapons box when that comes out? Because, like, with how strict Games Workshop is in making sure that whenever its IP gets used by video game developers, or say people doing art for Magic cards, which I would know nothing about, they are extremely particular that the art be something that you can go into a Games Workshop store and buy. Right? There are no liberties taken at any point with what a model looks like and how you are allowed to depict it. Which makes me think these are something the developers had access to and which were in the pipeline, but were delayed for whatever reason.
Operator shift change overdue. Your tardiness has been flagged for invigilation.
Open the gates.
Shift chronometer reset. You're registered as on duty. Carry out the Omniscience mark according to ethnicity.
Inserting payload.
What did you do for work, Cameron? Well, I talked about dolls and ate 150 grams of sugar in front of people. This is a lot of sugar.
Transmitting override authorization. Set course for stratospheric detonation.
The rite of safeguard must be performed. Seek an authorized Magos at the command console.
Any little things hidden around? Audio logs, anyone? No audio logs? Man. Oh no, Phazon Kiwi. No data slates in the tutorial. Boo. How do we frag grenade again? Circle? Okay.
Machine Spirit, where is the command console?
On the observation platform above. Magos on duty does not respond.
Summon the lift.
Catch! Stupid controller. I wonder what we shot. Oh, there was a red barrel we could have shot. Did I see any part of the academic conference about the Warhammer 40k setting? The what?
Spirit, what is the status of the orbital launcher?
Hibernation. Console inactive for 22 hours. This impiety to the Omniscient has been.
Activate launch systems.
The rite of initialization must be performed. Seek an authorized Magos at the command console. Command console is posted at the edge of the observation platform. A Magos will attend to you shortly.
Doubtful.
You want to see something that I've not seen in a game before?
Predictions complete. Awakening systems from hibernation. Rite of capacitors initialized. Personnel may begin prayers of charging.
Drone. Can you not damn process?
Seismic disruptions have occurred. Launch trajectory may have been altered.
I wonder where this goes. Curious.
Organic presence detected on the rampage. All personnel vacate for launch. Launch preparations complete. Standing by, Magos.
Batter up. I did so much better at that the last time I played this. Then again, I also didn't have nougat stuck in my teeth the entire time. What the hell is my life?
Computations complete. Awakening systems from hibernation. Right of capacitors initialized. Personnel may begin prayers of charging.
I don't know if my life rules or if it's deeply embarrassing.
Seismic disruptions have occurred. Launch trajectory may have been altered.
Oh, you were one lucky little monkey. Look at you go.
Organic presence detected on the railway. Personnel vacate for launch. Launch preparations complete. Standing by. Ayos.
Two, three. Stomp. 1, 2, 3. Blast. 1, 2, 3. This is a rhythm game. 1, 2, 3. Parry. 1, 2, 3. Stomp. 1, 2, 3. Shoot. Oh, threw off my rhythm. Anyone else have anything to say? Yeah, it's a rhythm game. Math board games, I absolutely agree with you. I want a game similar to this, where you play as an orc, but when you die, instead of saying you died, it says you was mucking about, and it makes you get back up. God, I'm disgusting. I wouldn't say they listen to Sabaton. I would say they listen to Luca Turilli. Oh my god, you've been the guy on the box this entire time?
I will take you all with me. I will not rest until you lie dead at my feet.
Alright, let's let them get some critical mass back up, and 1, 2, 3, stomp. 1, 2, 3. Please turn around. Excuse me, I have to catch one of your little buddies. I also love how they insist on talking to the bugs as if they have an individual consciousness.
We will eradicate your kind from the galaxy.
Like, the individual bugs are just like, look, man, I just work here. I don't know why you insist on trash talking me. I can try to pass on your comments to my manager, but honestly,
May that virus strip your flesh from your bones.
this is gonna help. That was not the dodge I was expecting. Okay, I might not know how to fight the Carnifex. In fact, Carnifex is not the manager. Carnifices are not Synapse creatures. Carnifices versus Carnifussy. So I think the conclusion that I'm working on here is that in the right context, a power fantasy fucking rules. You just kind of have to know what it is. Sphinges? Yeah, a familiar called L. I would say something like the plurification? What the hell is that? Of Sphinx. I love the ribbon of scar tissue around your neck, as if your head has been cut off and attached to a different body.
Praise the Emperor.
That is actually an order you're being given.
The wound was fatal. You survived only through the Rubicon surgery. We remade you. You are a Primaris now.
Why?
I really love the detail that the chaplain's skull mask has a different, like,
Summoned by the Primar.
the teeth are different.
I must get back to the Watch Fortress.
You have been reassigned.
Like, those are actually, like, they look like teeth,
Death Watch.
and the mask looks like
The
bone.
Inquisition can find no stain
It's a
on
small
you.
detail. I like
Titus,
it.
accused of heresy. You have served penance in the Death Watch for almost a century, and not once have you faltered. But you will never know redemption until you have faced the judgment of your brothers. Prove
I mean,
yourself to us.
what kind of skull could a Space Marine wear as a helmet? Where's that coming from? It's the opening
What
titles.
is your life? My honor is my life. What is your fate? My duty is my fate.
What is your fear?
My fear is to fail.
What is your reward?
My salvation is my reward.
I kind of prefer the much older version of this.
Your
Uh,
Craft.
which I think is now probably just a Dark Angels
What
thing,
is your pledge?
where it was like, what is your duty? The Emperor's will. What is the Emperor's will? Death. What is like? It was a circular one, and it seemed like the kind of thing that maybe you would hope a Space Marine could successfully internalize because they're at best paraliterate.
You are now stronger, faster, and more resilient. You will take your place as an Ultramarine once more. Your brothers will know that you served in the Death Watch, but your dishonorable status as a Black Shield has been redacted from the archives. Should it be discovered, there would be questions. Lord Kelgar has offered you a second chance. Do not taint it.
Sergeant Ventia had secured the spaceport and handed over its defense to the Cadians.
Ventia,
Brother,
Lieutenant. Kudanos, we have work to do.
This little guy is making the sign of the Aquila.
yes, brother.
You know, it is halfway between an imperial benediction and a salute. Whereas they make you hook your thumbs together and spread your fingers in the symbol of an eagle. That was a Dan Abnett invention. Could you imagine throwing that as a gang sign and the other gang members just beat you up? You know, they bend up your glasses and throw them on the roof of the school. I also like how one of Dan Abnett's villains has the inversion of that as their sign. One of the Archons in the Gaunt's Ghost novels, they lace their fingers together and use them to cover their mouth. Right, which is kind of like, you know how in a lot of satanic ritual is inversions of Catholic ritual, right? Like you have the upside down cross. It draws on that. So instead of like the thumbs together with the fingers spread out, you put the fingers together. I thought it was thoughtful and interesting. Yeah, kind of. Yeah, you have 8. Oh, I never even thought of that. The fingers spreading out evokes the 8-pointed Chaos Star. Right? It's like in Fury Road. The God. Immortan Joe's symbol or hand gesture, the V8. With the fingers representing the cylinders of a V8 engine. Also, you are doing the fucking... It's apparently 2022 in here because we are doing the Dr. Livesey walk from Russian Treasure Island.
Lieutenant Titus reporting for duty.
For an indication of how specific Games Workshop is with what their models can look like in other people's media, this is a model you can buy. This exact guy. This is what the Ultramarines 10th Company Captain looks like.
I cannot afford discord among the men. Not now. You're a lieutenant now. Will that be a problem?
No, Captain.
Very well. We're facing a Tyranid splinter fleet. They engaged us on 2 planets. Avarax, a hive world, and Kadaku, which you already know. We're abandoning the latter. It's mostly Adeptus Mechanicus research facilities. We're evacuating critical assets and personnel. These defense guns are keeping the skies clear for our ships. The Tyranids have taken note. Get down there and protect those guns.
Captain, you wish to see me?
Sergeant, this is Lieutenant Titus. He'll be taking over command of your squad.
Sir,
I expect you on the ground within 30 minutes. Dismissed.
For reference, there are 1,000 Marines in the Ultramarines at any one time.
Lieutenant, forgive my hesitation. I am merely surprised by this development.
As am I.
There might be 100 deployed in a company.
Sergeant Gadriel, the Absolver is ready to depart. Brother Chiron, this is Lieutenant Titus.
They're like, we've never met this guy.
Is that so? Well, I shall be glad to have a commander of such experience.
Is the rest of the squad ready?
Already assembled on the flight deck.
Good. We leave immediately.
Oh yeah, Gadriel is hot. He is a beautiful man. Chiron is also an extremely handsome man. Titus? I'm sure there are people out there who are like, man, Titus is a hottie. They're all way too beautiful to be Space Marines.
From the Hive Fleet. Do not engage.
There is no universe in which a Space Marine should be like 1/10 this handsome.
What is our assignment?
The Cadians have lost control of the orbital guns. We are to recapture them.
Lost them already.
The Tyranids are hurling spores of those guns in great waves.
Blood Angels start off
I'm
beautiful.
impressed the Cadians held out this long.
But like, I don't think they stay that way.
Altarius and Elliot make up the rest of our squad.
Have any of you faced Tyranids before?
Only these past 2 days.
Then there is much to learn.
I look forward to it.
What do you think you're doing? Stand aside. Those warheads are not properly secured. Do you know what will happen if one comes loose? Path obstructed. Stand aside. I'll do it myself. Go and find a tech priest and tighten the screws in that half-brain of yours. Task aborted. Seeking lessons of cogitation. Magus Gallio will hear of this.
Okay. If we can access missions.
The effects of the virus bomb were so short-lived.
The kill team we found on Kadaku gave their lives to deploy it.
They bought us precious hours. Without them, this war would have gone very differently.
It was pleasing to see them.
I guess if we have restarted the campaign, we don't have access to any missions, right? I would have loved to have shown y'all the mission where you make your last stand.
Sergeant,
Brothers, we are joined by Lieutenant Titus.
welcome, brother. We are yours to command.
We leave immediately.
Yes, Lieutenant.
I really want to know what's causing that interference that makes the sound cut out. Next time it happens, someone time the interval. 2:07:27.
in the Death Watch?
Yes.
That must have been a great honor. It's a privilege to serve with you.
Approaching drop zone.
Let's go.
You see those service studs? Our lieutenant is over 200 years old. He couldn't have been born in Primaris. You're right. And now he has your command.
Oh, thank you, Melisarius.
On your feet, soldier! Move to defend our west flank! And get those heavy bolters resupplied! My lord! Major Sarkana, 8th Cadian Regiment.
Major, give me an update.
The wretched beasts have taken the orbital guns.
The 8th Cadian
Push
was
up to this
Creed's old
encampment and are
regiment,
staging a
right?
heavy assault.
What are they doing way the hell out
Take
here?
Altarius and Elion and remain here to secure the encampment.
Yes, brother.
Major, we must reach the defense guns.
Yes, my lord. Follow me.
How can you tell someone's from Cadia? Don't worry, they'll tell you.
The situation here has deteriorated. Those foul gargoyles pollute the skies.
The Tyranids have the orbital guns.
They do. These unrelenting attacks make a counteroffensive difficult.
We shall take care of that.
Major! We've got more incoming from the east!
Move to reinforce the Emperor! You, go with him.
We will assist in the defense.
Very good, my lord.
Numbers are endless.
I kind of want to write a story wherein people living on an Imperial planet encounter a Cadian regiment that's like, cool, this is New Cadia now. And the Cadians are like, you're all heretics, this is our new planet.
More Tipper swarms closing in.
Oh, combat knife. Cool.
Sending coordinates to your Auspex display. My lord, we are preparing an airstrike. Can you hold the enemy in place until it hits?
Consider it done. Enough spotted. Leave not one of them standing.
Fasci or not, this rule. Oh, sorry, I just shot a Cadian in the back of the head. Nobody saw anything. Hey, I wasn't finished talking to you. Are we just bullying this guy in the corner? Oh, hey, our little dudes made it.
The Eighth never miss! Everyone at this base owes you their life, my lords.
The Emperor protects.
We must proceed through the jungle to reach the orbital defense guns. Brother Lirio, assist the Cadians while they establish new defensive lines, then report back.
Yes, Lieutenant. It will not take long.
Am I actually on Angel of Death or whatever it's called? Can you tell? Angel of Death. Huh. I guess the game is just easy.
The orbital guns are on the other side of the swamp. Be alert. The Tyranids will be lying in wait.
This must be where the swarm originated.
These abhorrent husks are everywhere.
Living organic machines.
Indeed. Their ships, these pods, all of it.
Their very existence is heresy.
We shall thin their numbers today, brother.
Do I want the auto bolt rifle?
Tried to reach the downed storm talon. Bog stunk beyond words. Several of us drowned in its stagnant pools. Scope of the Tyranid infestation still unknown. Last readings suggested Kadaku was near the threshold for exterminatus. If that be the case, I would not weep for this world. It has already claimed too much.
Ravana, do not stop moving. I must be more vigilant.
One, two, three, parry. That was a big ol' interruption.
They never learn.
I have no idea what the QuickTime event in there is supposed to be. Dodge? You just like dodge the... You simply dodge the attack?
Restocking.
Fascinating. One, two, three. Stomp! Do I have this? I don't know if I have that.
I expect better of the Cadians. Losing the orbital guns was
Shivo, Pixel Savage.
They paid for it dearly. But the enemy numbers are not insignificant.
the Cadian 8th will have to do better.
You're familiar with this foe, brother?
I am.
How do the Tyranids compare to other Xenos?
They are an unrelenting plague, but they are cunning. The controlling influence of their hive mind makes them act as one. Tread carefully. The spores detonate when threats draw near.
Then let us take the advantage and destroy them. Your combat doctrines are unorthodox, Lieutenant. Which company did you serve with before this one?
I served the Emperor elsewhere.
The Death Watch.
Yes.
I hope I too will share that honor one day.
Please let me hit them. Such a bad shot.
Munitions secured.
More ammos.
Loading up.
Need to get through.
Eliminate them, then proceed. Throwing frag grenade.
Ow. Bro, what?
Reloading weapon.
Time for victory strength.
Well, that was embarrassing.
I am up.
Huh. He actually took the, You rarely see your AI dudes take the execution. It's nice to see.
Better. Restocking.
The tabletop RPGs, like, tried to run Dark Heresy, and
The most direct
it was a
route is through the
very, like,
swamp. Let us proceed.
crunchy
No.
system.
The swamp will be infested with
I want to
spirits.
try, what's the new one?
There is a
Imperium
bunker straddling the
Maledictum?
riverbed. We will cut through there.
The
That
newish
will
one,
have
I guess?
Considerable time. Surely
We will not trade strategy for expediency.
as you command.
Lieutenant, Captain Akaran has given us new orders. You must proceed alone.
Understood. Thank you, Lirio.
Wrath and
See you
Glory?
on the Resilient.
Ready to deploy special tactics. Resupplying.
Cover my reload.
There they are. The orbital guns. Need to reload. Another one dead.
Well, if it isn't the blowjob brothers. That's a reference to a drill tweet, not a homophobic slur.
They never learn. Reload! Reloading weapon! Restocking! Munitions secured.
Termagants are easily the most annoying enemies in this game. Alright.
Sir, I can hear reinforcements.
Man, using an execution on a Termagant just feels like,
Target destroyed.
I don't know, it feels mean.
Loading ammunition.
It's like tearing the head off a teddy bear, you know? People see it and are like, "Ugh, I don't know if that's right, man." Data slate? Data slate?
This will serve me well.
Jump down near the tower to your left.
Captain Iden gave the
Thank you.
order, and in my bones I felt the fear. I know I'm not supposed to. Thought it had been trained out of me. I'd already committed dereliction before reason kicked in. Where was I even running to? I deserve the punishment coming my way.
Thank you.
Angels! We're saved!
Holy terror.
Oi, shut it. You will desert your post, guardsman.
No, Lord. Never.
We've locked them in. We can do no more. Open the gate. Yes, my lord. Open the gates! But sir, you said open the bloody gates!
Defending that bunker door, wait till they stack up the walls, activate your special ability, and throw your grenades? Okay. Sounds reasonable.
Another wave. We can't hold them. You'll serve your emperor. What are they doing? Trying to get up here. Into position, men. Do not let them surround you.
I think I used it too early. Please let me have them?
Grabbing equipment. And can execute. Right grenade out.
Hey, I'm talking to you. Friendly fire's off, right? Man, these guys with Death Spitters really piss me off. Oh, aren't you a large lad?
I've sustained heavy damage. Vermin.
My lord! The gates are open!
Everybody inside, now!
Yes, my lord!
Should we not eliminate the remains of the swarm?
There will always be more. We must focus.
1, 2, 3. Stomp. 1, 2, 3. Now, messed up my rhythm.
Still draw breath.
Fine. Oh, wait, where do you think you're going? Straight to hell. That's where you're going.
Guardsmen, get these gates closed.
Command now! Stand by!
Do not relent in your attacks. We are wasting time. Proceed through the gates.
How many of y'all made it?
Do that.
Weren't there a lot more of you? Where are the rest of you?
You have yet to see the worst of them. Oh, I look forward to it.
Where are all your buddies? You spoke of a commentary in Reddit? Oh, that was Orwell's My Country Writer Left. It's good. Went back to Cadia? They deserted? Well, go and get them.
Major Sakana,
Go ahead!
we met with one of your squads.
Thank you, my lord. I shall give them new orders.
The way is clear. Proceed.
Holy terror.
Look at all the men sleeping here.
Looks like a slaughter. No excuse for cowardice. Grabbing equipment. This will serve me well.
The shotgun. Man, is anyone else looking forward to the new orc kill team? The tank busters? Excuse me, let me just walk through this barricade. Also the Ratling, or the Imperial Guard Abhuman team. I think they're both cool. I like the Ratling, who is making a croque monsieur on the power pack for his Laz sniper rifle. Ugh. Is no one clean? Nope, got that one already. Tyranids? Here? Alright, well, gotta do it the old-fashioned way. Mean. Ugh. The Melter Rifle is not well suited to this kind of combat. Have you all taken care of this yet?
I repeat, awaiting orders to attack. Major, do you read?
This is Lieutenant Titus. Identify yourself.
Captain Iden, sir. Our long-range comms were damaged in battle.
They must be close. Hold fast, Captain. We are coming.
I would love to have an interaction with an Imperial Guard officer who's like, who are you? And you're like, I'm Lieutenant this. And he's like, well, I'm Captain my name. So, you know, I believe Captain outranks the Lieutenant, so you go here. And then they find out you're a Space Marine later. I think that would be fun. Especially if you were just like, yeah, I guess so. I mean...
The facility is just beyond those gates.
There must be a console that opens them.
I need you to walk slightly closer to that. Two, three, stomp. 1, 2, 3, execute. 1, 2, 3, interrupt. Parry. Catch. You know, I bet you thought you were doing something there. Hello. You know what? If you're able to absorb 4 shots from a Hellblaster, have a nice day. Good work. I don't feel it's necessary for us to continue this conversation. Have a nice day, sir.
Restocking. Deploy frag grenade.
Mine's bigger. That can't have been 4 misses in a row. Excuse me, I'm going to go and collect my plasma pistol.
A fine gift from the Forge.
Actually, both the plasma and melta weapons feel extremely weedy.
The stench of that one was impressive.
But like, I should probably try to wrap it up here. What are my thoughts on this game? It's cool as hell. It's fun to play. It makes you feel like a real big dude. All of the combat animations and the fighting style really nail the feel of weighing, I don't know, 900 pounds. Like, you have so much inertia in your moveset, right? You need to, like, be thoughtful of how you're playing, because it's really easy for you to get carried away and wind up out of position, moving at like 30 miles an hour, and have very little ability to change your momentum. And I think that suits the Ultramarines particularly well, because you need to be thoughtful but aggressive, if that makes any sense to you, right? Like, your chain attacks take like 30 seconds to resolve, but have really satisfying outcomes, right? Cool. That's fun. But once you're locked into them, you feel like you're locked into them. And if you don't use them correctly, the Tyranids do a lot of damage to you. So you kind of need to be aware of your surroundings and be thinking, where am I going with this? What do I want this to look like at the end? And that feels very Ultramarine to me. The game does have some kind of like fashy stuff, right? Like, it is very big on all of the like entry points into that, right? Like the super elite warrior ethos versus the hordes of enemies who are both powerful and pathetic, right? Like that's fairly well trod territory, I feel, in 2024. That's something people understand. That has entered the public consciousness as being like an entry point into fascist thought. And it presents that pretty uncritically. Is that a problem? I suppose it is if you don't recognize it. Because the reason it's a problem is because it's pretty compelling. It's pretty fun. That is, I feel, the, like, as I mentioned before, I once heard a historian say that is kind of like, one of the foundational Western myths of the 300 Spartans against Xerxes. Big asterisk on that. Like, I feel he was saying that knowing that the 300 Spartans is kind of a myth, right? There were a couple thousand Greek soldiers, 300 of them were Spartans, several hundred of them were people the Spartans owned. Does this play it straight? Kind of, right? Like, I feel that the extreme ornamentation and the Warhammer 40k universe is inherently ridiculous. All of its aesthetics are ridiculous. It is kinda stupid. That is very British, right? Everything is extremely ornamental. Helldivers, I feel, is more austere, right? Like the American idea of dystopian empire in public fiction, right? In public science fiction or popular science fiction is the empire from Star Wars, where everything is like smooth and interchangeable and like gray and like brutalist would be the American version of this, whereas the British version is very like Catholicism with the serial numbers filed off, i.e., the Church of England. I honestly think that the people who started playing this game, I'm thinking here of Paul Tassi, who tweeted about it quite a bit when it came out, looking at things being like, what the fuck is this? Indicating a cherub. And the 40K fandom being like, oh yeah, that's a cyber cherub. Here's what that is. And him saying, that's not normal. This freaks me out. What is this? Right? I feel that that is like the correct approach to Warhammer 40K. Does the Church of England have the necessary ostentation for that? Because whenever I see anything from like, it's got quite a lot of ornamentation. It's quite ostentatious. It's pretty gold. Like when I see footage from like the Christmas Mass at Oxford Trinity College, that's pretty ostentatious, right? The royal family, you know, the I guess traditional British English aesthetic, the imperial British aesthetic, it's pretty ornamental, right? Like lots of big hats, lots of brass buttons, big shoulder boards, miters. Relative to the Catholics, yeah. From an outsider to both, they both seem pretty ornamental. I'm not sure anyone's looking at an Anglican ceremony and thinking, austere. And I think one of the problems with 40K is that once you start to get any kind of familiarity with it, you stop seeing how ludicrous it is. Right? You're just like, oh yeah, that's just a cyber cherub. What? Whereas the correct, like every time you see a cyber cherub, you should be like, man, this is fucked up. These people are fucked up. This is not normal. Maybe that's a testament to the adaptability of the human mind. You can get used to anything. Even calling it the Imperium of Man. That's weird. Fake Latin, huh? And then you would have to be like, well, I mean, it's represented to us as Latin because it occupies the same cultural and religious and pseudo-mystical elements that we as English speakers encounter Latin, or the ways that which we encounter Latin, right? The idea that, you know, Low Gothic is English and High Gothic is Latin is simply a projection from their universe into ours, and we're like, you know, that's just how it's best to interpret those. It's like, you're being weird. yeah, once you become immersed in it, right? It's fine. It's my thesis on this is it's fun, but it's important to like poke your head out of it a little bit. You know, to step outside your immersive experience and go, ooh. Because having encountered online people who take this stuff seriously, that is real, real hard to have to like explain to a normal person. Yeah, you do not want to end up like Arch, right? The Imperium, I guess I should say this, is not aspirational. The Imperium was not even aspirational for the people in it who made it. The Imperium of Man is the fail state. Right? Actually, hold on. There is a great interview on YouTube with Aaron Dembski-Bowden, done by the Black Library, when the Horus Heresy series was wrapping up. And I'm not going to show it for you because that would get us a copyright strike. But in it, Aaron Dembski-Bowden is talking a bit about like the stakes of the Horus Heresy at this point, the stakes of the Siege of Terra. And he says that what comes out of the Siege of Terra is not plan A, it's not plan B, it's not plan C. It's like plan Q. X, maybe Y, could even be plan Z. We don't know because the people who had plans are all dead. The Imperium is like what came out of the ashes, and it's debatable whether anything came out of the ashes. Maybe this is just the ashes and it's just taking this long for them to die. I don't know. I think that's important to keep in mind, that the Imperium is the fail state. For both factions in the universe's foundational mythology. Right? The Imperium is not what the Emperor wanted, and it's not what Horus wanted. They both failed. And this is the result of everyone involved failing. There is nothing good here. Except the motivations of individual people who, in spite of the miserable situation they find themselves in, can still be capable of things like courage, nobility, honor, sacrifice, devotion, love. It's just that all of those things perpetuate the Imperium. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Was there anything else I wanted to say? Warhammer 40k is rad as hell precisely because it's everything bad about medieval society or in the cultural perception of it, plus modern society cranked up to 11 and in space. This might be a controversial statement. I remember looking at the cover of the second edition Sisters of Battle Codex when I was like 17, 18, whenever that book came out, looking at it and thinking, this game is a specific kind of white person in space forever. It's not quite Trumpism in space forever, and it's not quite Thatcherism in space forever. But it's related, you know? And it's like very clearly not Americanism in space forever, I feel. It's particularly British. So Maybe it is just Thatcherism in space forever. But I feel it's significantly like, I guess maybe this is just coming to it 40 years after Thatcherism and thinking, the real world is a lot meaner than Thatcher. Like, when the real world right looks at Warhammer 40K and says, that's what we want. That looks great. We like that. That means that they have gotten worse in a way that makes 40K aspirational. Anyway, that's the stream for this week. Thank you for showing up. I'm glad you were here. I will see you all in the future.